The most looked at painting in human history has been studied for over 500 years. Art historians, scientists, cryptographers, millions of visitors standing in front of it every year at the Louvre, craning their necks, holding up their phones. And for all of that time, nobody looked at the background. The Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci sometime between 1503 and 1519. It is the most recognized image on Earth. The woman, the smile, the sfumato, the soft, dissolving edges that make her expression shift depending on where your eyes land. That is what everyone sees. But Leonardo placed something behind her, a landscape, mountains, water, a winding road, and 2 bridges, and for more than 500 years, those bridges were considered imaginary. Background detail, atmospheric filler, the kind of thing a painter invents to give depth to a composition. Nobody thought to check. In 2023, an Italian art historian named Silvano Vincetti announced something that stopped the art world cold. The bridge on the right side of the painting, and the smaller one, the one nobody ever focused on, was real. Not invented, not approximate, real. Vincetti cross-referenced Leonardo's notebooks, historical land registry documents, and aerial surveys of the Tuscan and Umbrian countryside. And he identified the bridge as the Ponte Romito, a 4-arch bridge that once stood in the town of Laterina in the Arezzo province of Tuscany. A bridge Leonardo would have known. A bridge that appears in historical records from exactly the period when he was painting the Mona Lisa, 500 years, the most studied painting in history. And the answer was sitting in the background the entire time. But to understand why this matters, why this is not just an interesting footnote but a proof of something extraordinary, we need to understand how Leonardo actually worked. Most painters of his time painted from imagination or convention. Backgrounds were symbolic, decorative, or borrowed from other paintings. The landscape behind a figure existed to suggest mood, not to document reality. Leonardo did not work that way. He was constitutionally incapable of inventing something he could observe instead. His notebooks, thousands of pages of them, are filled with studies of water currents, rock formations, atmospheric perspective, the way light behaves differently at different altitudes. He studied geology to paint mountains. He studied hydrology to paint rivers. When he painted a bridge he had seen. This is what his contemporaries found bewildering and what modern researchers keep rediscovering. Leonardo did not separate art from science, observation from imagination, the painted world from the real one. For him, they were the same investigation. Now look at the background of the Mona Lisa again. The landscape behind her is not symmetrical. The left side sits higher than the right. The horizon line on her left is noticeably elevated compared to the horizon on her right. For centuries, this was interpreted as a compositional quirk, or a mistake, or a deliberate surrealist device before surrealism existed. In fact, it is none of those things. Leonardo painted 2 different viewpoints simultaneously. The left side of the background and the right side were observed from 2 different positions. He stitched them together into a single landscape the way our eyes actually construct the world. Not from one fixed point, but from the constant small movements of a living, looking human being. This is not a technique that existed in painting. Leonardo invented it to solve a problem that no one else had even identified as a problem. The bridge on the right sits in the lower landscape. The mountains on the left rise from a higher one. And the woman sits between them, at the exact point where 2 different worlds meet. Vincetti's identification of the Ponte Romito did something else beyond locating a specific bridge. It placed Leonardo in a specific location at a specific time. The Arezzo area of Tuscany was a region Leonardo passed through on documented journeys. Laterina sits along a route he would have traveled. The bridge appears in land records from the early 1500s. Exactly the window in which the Mona Lisa was being painted. This is how Leonardo worked. He looked at something. He remembered it with a precision that modern researchers describe as almost photographic. And then, sometimes years later, he placed it exactly where it needed to be. Not as a copy, not as documentation, as a choice. Because that particular bridge, in that particular position, in that particular light, was the right thing to be there. There is one more detail that makes this discovery feel like something more than archaeology. The bridge Vincetti identified no longer exists in its original form. It was partially destroyed and reconstructed over the centuries. But the 4 arches Leonardo painted match the historical records of the original structure exactly, which means the Mona Lisa is now one of the most precise historical records we have of what that bridge looked like. The painting that everyone came to see for the woman in the foreground turns out to also be a document. A precise, deliberately observed record of a specific place on a specific road in Tuscany, painted by a man who could not look at the world without also needing to understand it. 500 years of looking, and the answer was always there, in the corner of the frame, in the background, behind her. Leonardo did not hide it. He just painted it where he saw it, in its correct position, at its correct scale, with its correct number of arches. He trusted that someone would eventually look. I would love to know what you think in the comments, whether you believe Leonardo placed that bridge deliberately as a message, or whether for him, painting what he saw was simply never a choice, but a compulsion he could not have explained even if someone had asked. See you in the next video.